think of the activity putting 12 educational practices in order? Were you accurate according to Hattie? Do you have justifications of your own that are different from Hattie's conclusions? Did you look over the site where all 252 of Hattie's educational practices appear? And what were you most surprised about? What did you agree most with and what did you disagree most with? You've seen that behavior intervention is very high in the effect sizes. 0.62 means that when a teacher has the norms and consequences firmly established, practiced, and uses them consistently, learning increases. Students feel safe, secure, and confident that if other students, also themselves, but if other students act inappropriately, not only will you do something about it, but everyone knows what's going to happen, and that in the end, they've chosen the consequences. In short, agency all around. So now, remember in the first part of this lesson, when I presented the objectives, and I mentioned that there's a subtle but important distinction between positive discipline and positive reinforcement? Well, this is the difference. Positive discipline reminds you to have a solid platform of classroom management established. And positive reinforcement are techniques to establish that classroom management positively. So in this part of the lesson, get ready, drum roll please, we're going to explore a myriad of ways that you can change any negative messaging you may do in the classroom, whether you're aware of it or not, to positive messaging, positive reinforcement. How powerful your phenomenon-based learning projects are going to be, or any lesson you give for that matter. Let's go. So what is positive reinforcement? It's actually quite simple. Instead of using a negative, we use a positive. Once you start doing it, you're going to be amazed at the change in the general attitude of your students, and also be amazed at how much more productive everyone is because you're explaining what to do instead of what not to do. Doesn't that sound incredibly welcome? There's a story about a dolphin trainer in Florida. She'd be at the dolphin pool for hours every day, communing with her watery friends. Because many of those hours would be standing poolside and throwing fish at treats, often storks from nearby reserves would fly to her, land on her shoulder, and beg for food. This became so common that she spent a lot of time dislodging storks from her shoulders, and storks are actually heavy. They're an average of 8 kilos or 18 pounds. That's a lot to have on your shoulders even when you don't want them to be there. But because the temptation was so strong to get fish, the storks didn't change their behavior until the trainer decided to switch paradigms. And instead of being really frustrated each day at trying to teach them where they couldn't land, she began teaching them where they could land. She put colorful towels on the cement next to her and taught them to land on the towels instead of her shoulders and gave them treats when they did that. She was able to be more productive all around her. Her shoulders healed from all the weight. The storks were happy because they still got treats, and the dolphins got more attention because their human friend wasn't so distracted anymore. Everybody won. Amazing, right? Simple, so effective. Can you see how that translates into your learning environment? I know what you're thinking. How long did it take the dolphin trainer to train the storks? And how long is it going to take me to change to positive messaging? Such good questions. The good news is that the answer lies in the dynamic of habits, and habits can be changed. The key is the tipping point. And what in the world does that mean, you're asking? When we want to change something in our lives so that it's habitual, we need to practice it until the frequency falls on the side of what we want more than what we don't want. The concept actually applies to every part of our lives, not just the classroom. Beliefs, practices, routines, but eventually we're going to stick to the classroom. Right now, I just want to give you an example of how pervasive negative messaging is. Most of us have been brought up with negative reinforcement in our families and in society, whether we've ever identified it that way or not. People say no to us most of the time, and we probably use negatives a lot more than we think because of how our society communicates with us. Don't walk here. Don't walk on the grass. Don't touch the painting. Don't use this emergency door. Don't call me. Does this sound familiar? But let's go back to the classroom. I don't give only negative messaging, you're thinking. I love my students. I care about them. I do everything I can to create a positive mood in the classroom. All right, I absolutely believe it because in the majority of the classrooms I've been in, almost 100% of them, you all truly, deeply care about your students. And yet, Without realizing it, we all fall into negative messaging if we're not careful, unwittingly. And then the caring that we have for them is often hidden behind this habitual negative phrasing. I'll give you some examples and you tell me if this sounds familiar. Don't leave your coat there. Don't speak without raising your hand. Don't be late. Don't bully others. Don't use your cell phone in class. Don't fight. Don't throw things. Don't run. Don't share your password. Well, you're thinking that's exactly what they shouldn't do. Except not only do these messages create a negative environment, according to reliable neurological studies, when the brain hears a negative message, it only hears the content and not the negative. So if you say, don't run, the student's mind hears, run. If you say, don't fight, the child's nervous system engages because her mind hears, fight. So counterintuitive, isn't it? I know, and yet absolutely true. Listen, I took a driving test in Spain, and I'd been driving for more than 30 years by that time. But the inspectors do this purposely. He pointed to a street on the left and said, take the next left, but don't turn there. I heard, take the next left and turn there. And I turned into ongoing traffic. Need we say that I failed the exam and was humiliated, to say the least? No, but I just did. Listen, but it's biology. So, back to the tipping point. If we want positive reinforcement to reign in our classes, we need to practice positive messaging. All the messages you just saw can be changed to the positive. Watch this magic. Don't run. Please walk in public places. Don't speak without raising your hands. Please raise your hands so others know you want to speak. Don't be late. Please be on time. Don't leave your coat there. Please hang up coats on the hooks. Don't use your cell phone in class. Please use cell phones outside of class. Don't bully others. Be respectful of others' weaknesses. I like that one. Don't share your passwords. Keep your password private. Don't fight. I really like this one. Use negotiating skills with your mouth. Words. Don't throw things. Flying objects are only for space travel. Come on, let's have a little fun, right? How does it sound? Amazing, right? So how do we do that? That's why you're here, and I'm going to give you concrete ways to switch from the left side to the right side, so your tipping point is going to be habitually positive messaging. So let me explain how we can transform our learning environment with just a little bit of effort. I'll tell you what happened to me, because when I started teaching, my classroom management was not a pretty picture. I've shared in other videos how I didn't have a very productive training period when I was studying to be a teacher. My mentor teacher was about to marry a much sought after bachelor from the jet set, and all she could think about were the wedding preparations. Needless to say, I learned very little about planning a primary curriculum, not to mention classroom management. So what did I do? Well, what most of us do when we have no training. We use what we learned growing up. And what did I learn growing up? Well, my mother controlled my sisters and brother and me by screaming at us. And she was good at it. And she was consistent at it. So what does a child who's been screamed at all her life do in a classroom? She screams at other people. And because I was a new teacher, I screamed at my students. Now, that's not what I look like. I don't have gorgeous red hair, but that's probably what I look like from my students' perspective. And did it work? Sure it did. I was bigger and louder than my students, so I could bend them to my will just by shouting at them. Did it create a comfortable, secure, safe learning environment? Of course not. It was horrible. My students didn't like seeing me walk into the classroom. I didn't like being there very much. And when I went home, I was drained and felt awful about the whole situation. So what did I do? Well, I started finding models that would teach me to encourage my students to follow my lesson plans in a positive way. Was it easy? It was not easy. It was not comfortable, and it did not happen all at once. I found one book after another and tried out every one of their tips and tricks. This last one, The First Days of School, and the one before it, Positive Discipline, oh my goodness, they are so good. But all of them have incredibly valuable tips, whatever resonates for you. That angry face disappeared from the classroom, and we all became a lot happier. Again, neither of these are me, but it's a wonderful representation of what can happen when we work at creating a positive learning environment, right? This is what we all want. so that learning is faster and deeper. And again, it wasn't instantaneous. It wasn't simple, but oh my goodness, every time I could make that shift from not screaming and finding ways to insert techniques that created a positive learning environment, we all felt satisfaction and relief. And because I finally had a toolbox of techniques to use, I became calmer and I became more confident. And so my students sensed that in me and they became more relaxed because of it. They realized that they'd need to be more responsible for following the norms and consequences that they had co-created. And they also realized that I was going to insist that every single one of them had to adhere and recognize the consequences because we all agreed to them. We all created them. So now let's take a second break here, because now we're going to get into the concrete techniques you can use to make positive reinforcement habitual. Here are a few situations you might recognize. How would you usually handle these situations? What would you feel? What would you say? What do you expect your students to do? How do you feel they're going to act, feel? I want you to imagine the whole situation, just hypothetically. What are your expectations? Do you pause before you say something, or do you just blurt something out? I mean, all of us are different, but I'd like you to just really consider this. What's helpful here is to think honestly about each situation, if you act or react. There is no judgment here. We are human in a classroom with other humans, and this life is a learning experience in itself. So we experiment with what works inside and outside of the classroom and see if we can make changes so that our lives are more pleasant and our students' lives are also more pleasant but more productive as well. So take 10 to 15 minutes and really do some heartfelt ponderings. And then we are going to continue with the last part of this lesson when you're through. You'll find this document in the folder for Module 1, Lesson 5, called How Would I React to These Situations? All right, see you soon. 10 or 15 minutes. Really put your heart into it, and it will pay off. You'll see.